Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem. Last week, I was out at the rat race in Oregon and got to witness something pretty special. A good friend of mine, Nick Grease, who we've had on the show before, just dominated. We had 7 out of 7 days, a bunch of really good tasks, some of them pretty tough, not what I would call classic conditions. We're dealing with quite a bit of wind and stuff, so it was certainly a challenge, but also a ton of fun. And it's hard to stay on top for 7 days, but that's what Nick did, and he won with grace and style. And so I invited Nick to come back onto the show because he literally went from zero to hero here. In the PWC down in Brazil a month ago, he got dead last, which is pretty hard to do. And but he did. He got dead last after the Pan Ams down there, which he was also dominating early, and then had a couple bad days and fell off there. And so we talk about headspace. We talk about some of the, he saw a really terrifically bad accident flying in Kenya with Cedar Wright back in January, February, I believe. And so was dealing with some PTSD that I think many of us have dealt with in our sport, unfortunately. So we talk about headspace and psychology and strategy and discipline. And this was basically, as we kind of get into the comp scene in the Northern Hemisphere summer, I thought it'd be a really timely time to talk to Nick about comps. He's been doing it almost 20 years. He got into it in a very special, funny, unique way, which we covered a little bit on the first show with him back a couple years ago, but we get into it again on this one. And I just think you're really going to enjoy this. Also, a little bit of housekeeping before we get into the show. Ushba and I and Nick, and we've all been working on this insurance thing, and Nick talks about it a little bit at the end of the show, but we've come up with what we think is kind of the best solution through Global Rescue and IMG, and that doesn't have any exclusions for our sport. We're still working with them on competitions and some other stuff, so we'll get back to you on that. But if you are traveling and you'll be more than 100 miles from home, these are great solutions. You can find out more on my website, cloudbasedmayhem.com, and just do a search for insurance. You can see that there. There are links to it, but there will soon be links through Ushba, if you're an Ushba member, that will get you a discount and some other good stuff. So really psyched on that. We've been working on that for months and months and months, and it's nice to have kind of a one-stop solution that is available now, and will soon, we hope, also have competitions covered. So exciting news there. What else? A good friend of mine, Evan Bouchier, has a couple friends who broke away from Black Diamond a little bit ago, and they're making these really cool gloves. He was selling them at Rat Race. They're a direct, so they're kind of cut out the middleman, so they're super reasonable and really well made. They're called Truck Gloves. You can find them on truckgloves.com, and they're offering a 10% discount to our listeners right now. And they've got mitts, they've got every kind of range, and they're actually going to be coming out with a paragliding specific glove, but I used them at the race. They're awesome. I wouldn't call them, a full winter glove or spring glove. They're more, for racing or for when it's not super, super cold, but, really well put together, great feel, really comfortable, and you can just order them direct. And if you go to their website, truckgloves.com right now, and put in the discount code CloudBaseMayhem, 2 separate words, then you'll get 10% off. Again, that code is Cloud-Based Mayhem, and the website is truckgloves.com. One other bit of housekeeping, cloudbasedmayhem.com. If you go to that website, you can see our store. I've got some killer new women's shirts, a new color from Patagonia. These are all organic, fair trade, classic Patagonia stuff, lasts forever. It's got our Cloud-Based Mayhem logo and stuff on the back. And then our great hats by Annika Herden, her recaps, which were a big hit out at the Rat Race. These are the coolest trucker hats ever. So really psyched to be sporting those, and a great way for you to support the show. And let's get into it. Without further delay, please enjoy this very cool talk with my good friend, Nick Reese. Nick, awesome to have you back on the show. It was so fun racing around the skies with you last week at the Rat Race, 7 out of 7 days. That was pretty incredible, and I appreciate you taking the time out. I understand you're on a little road trip or traveling right now, so but sounds pretty good in your car, and just psyched to sit down and talk to you and about going from zero to hero. You've had quite a run in the competition scene lately, down in the PWC, and just scoring at the Rat Race. So congratulations, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a journey. I think a full spectrum result.
Yeah, I'll say. So before we get into these last couple comps, because I want to talk kind of big picture comps and psychology and all the stuff, and you've also been through some kind of hairy stuff this year. But before that, we talked about this a little bit in the first podcast, and people can listen to that and to get a refresher. But take me back, I think almost 20 years now, to your kind of first comp. How did you get into comps? Because it's quite a funny story. And then we can fast forward to the rat race.
Yeah, so I originally started flying. I started flying in 2001, and quickly became obsessed, just full obsession. That's people kind of sometimes, oh well, you seem to be decent at this sport. How did you get so good? And I think Gladwell's 10,000 hour rule, kicks in with a lot of us. And I know Gavin, you were similar. I've witnessed your obsession. And now we have some other people that call it skycrack, or which is probably fitting. But after getting into it and flying a bunch, I realized, wow, these competitions seem like the best money I can spend to get any kind of help or mentoring I could find. 20 years ago, it was really hard to find mentors. I don't know if it's because they were few and far between, or people were reticent to share, or what. But I just remember having a hell of a time finding a mentor or anybody that would tell me anything. And so competition seemed like the way forward. So I actually ended up traveling for, a year with my paraglider at some point. I decided that because of, watching Felix Volk in cross country jump off a dam in his hang glider, and then Bob Drury's article in cross country about this ridge Zagora in Morocco, that I actually was just playing marbles, which I thought I was, being really cool and flying paragliders, but actually I was just playing marbles, and that I needed to go get some. So I sold all my possessions and traveled for a year flying. And during that time, I ended up stumbling kind of onto a World Cup in Aptenau, Austria. And, these are the best and the brightest of paragliding, Bruce Goldsmith and Norman Losh, and, a bunch of, big stars. And but I didn't have any money. So I decided, instead of entering, which I couldn't anyway, but I just would sneak into the meals, first of all, to get food. And then I would sneak up I'd kind of ask, oh, what turn point are you going to, what are your turn points today? And someone would tell me, and then I'd hike up to one and just punch into the race as soon as I would see the field coming. And so that was kind of the first comp, I guess, that I didn't enter, but was at. Eventually I got caught by the organization because you needed to go up a lift one day because they weren't taking buses. I was sneaking on the buses too to get to launch sometimes. And then they're like, oh well, today you have to take a lift, so we have to pay for the lift, so every name has to be checked off. So I went and I figured out who wasn't at the race but was signed up, and the only person I could find was Jin, the famous Jin song. And so I was like, well, fuck, let's try it. So they got up to the gate to go into the lift, like, name, and I'm like, Jin Seok Song, and they just looked at me like I was, a crazy person. I thought it was worth a go. I guess I didn't quite realize how famous he was at that time. I was still relatively new to paragliding, and that I don't look Asian, in fact. So that also, I think, played into it.
Not even a little bit.
But anyway, they allowed me to be a wind dummy. They're like, no, you can come because you're crazy, but we need a wind dummy. So anyway, I did that. But that was kind of how it started. And actually, there's a guy, Schonauer. I remember the World Cup then was kind of a hippie scene. It was different than now. It was much more, I think, continental, and people would just follow the whole thing. Martin Orlick and Schonauer, Andy Bierensteel, these names, would follow the whole thing in their vans all summer. And it was just, it's kind of more of a tour that people could just drive to. So Schonauer was, I remember to this day, he was amazed at what I was doing. He's like, one day you should do the World Cups, So he's actually coming in a week, and I'm going to show him around the U.S., and then we're going to go to Chelan. So it'd be cool to, see him again.
The magic to me of something like the rat race is it's kind of solved this mentoring problem. You've got the sprint and the clinic and then the race. And, every day at this race last week, you got some of the pilots together and gave these amazing talks with all kinds of advice, so it's, kind of solving that problem to an extent of the mentoring thing. But what would you say to the listeners of the show that are maybe thinking about doing their first comp or maybe nervous about comps? Or have you learned over all these years, are comps good for flying? Are they a good strategy? Are they a good thing to get into? Any warnings maybe?
Yeah, look, I have mixed feelings about competitions for sure. I think comps are fantastic learning opportunities. I think, by the time I was doing comps, I could, do helicopters. I could stall my glider. I was flying 30 to 50 mile cross country flights. So I think that getting into competition flying at the right time is very important. I think and it depends on the competition. There's great, the Chabra Open or Ozone puts on some entry level competitions. The Rat Race has a sprint. There's entry level competitions. Those would be great earlier. But full on competition, I think you should be very comfortable, flying, launching, and landing anywhere. Because, as we say, it's a cross-country competition. So you're still, the first thing we're doing is flying cross-country. And the cross-country, the skills to me are be able to launch safely in any condition and be able to land safely in in almost any landing field. And so, because, those are the two times that it actually matters in terms of, how close to Earth you are. So as long as you can do those things, I think competitions are fantastic places to learn. And again, at competitions, I always remind people to be hard on yourself. There's nothing wrong with being hard on yourself, but don't beat yourself up. So, and that means there's plenty of lessons to be learned. Take the lessons as they come, process them, talk with more experienced pilots. And then once you process the information, you let it go. And that's where you don't beat yourself up. And so I think that's the best way. But, for $500, well, in the U.S. there are a lot, but $500 a week, you get a full cross-country clinic, and when you land, look at your track, look how you did. If you have questions during it, find someone who did it successfully, process it with them. Don't just, go, oh, that was cool, and go grab a beer and then, on to the social part of our sport. Utilize it for what it is this learning opportunity. Because there'll be plenty of time for the social aspect. But, I did find it interesting. Even at the Rat Race, we do lectures every day on launch, and we say, okay, come, and I try to challenge people that we're not just going to, regurgitate to you the platitudes and bumper stickers like, you can't win a comp on the first day, but you can lose it. We're going to try to, when in doubt, whip it out, whatever. We're trying to ask people questions from the days they had. And by the last day, no one had a single question,
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
And I found that kind of interesting. We're like, really? Okay. You guys are all, because I don't see many of you in goal, but they, it's kind of funny. It's so maybe people were maxed out. I mean, 7 days is a long time, and they were non-traditional conditions. They weren't classically good conditions, and so maybe everybody was tired and and all that. But I think what happens is that we have a tremendous mixture of a sport and aviation. And I think a lot of times the sport social part takes over where aviation should be. In the sense that, like in this case, if I were somebody in that position, and when I look back on my earlier times in my progression, I have my logbooks, and after every flight, as soon as I would land, I would fill in all the things I did well and all the things I did poorly. And therefore, if I went to launch and a panel of people like Gavin McClurg and Mitch Riley and, Jared Anderson were there, I would have my list written down. Oh, I have a question. And so I did find it interesting that, like I said, by the end, and I think it's because sometimes the sport takes over, and whereas people, in my opinion, should be focusing more on aviation.
What about let's talk a little bit about, fast forward to your last couple months. You went down to the Pan Ams, you crushed the first couple days and had a couple really bad days. And then immediately went to the PWC, and I'm not making fun of you, but that you got dead last. That was pretty epic. That's hard to do, and it's really hard to do. That's really hard to do. So and then you came back to the Rat Race and just dominated. And so, I mean, take me through that whole, we always talk about this, the paragliding has the ups and downs, just like we climb and we sink in a paraglider. It's the same in your head. And I know that you're intimate with those kind of things. What are take me through that how did you come back from that and what happened and how did you get last?
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting tale. I mean, look, paragliding is, I call her the most, manic temptress ever. In the sense that, the highs are incredibly high and the lows are often very low, often the ultimate low, for some. So for me, it's, we ebb and flow, and I've had just health issues actually over the past 3 years, in terms of my body falling apart. I call it running out of talent. But, basically my back went out at the Colombian World Championships, and I had to have back surgery. I came back from that and then crashed, basically fell over running, which is pretty funny, and tore and hurt my shoulder. And so that's so it's low level, body stuff. But then, basically and when did we go? In December, I went to Kenya. There was a fatality there that, of a tandem fatality. And so we were dealing, we had to deal with the body recoveries. And it's ultimately, like I said, it was just this horrible, tragic, experience. And part of paragliding that's always been, I've always dealt with rescues or had to deal, but I've luckily in 20 years, this is the first full body recovery that I've had to help perform. So, basically we came back from that and I had PTSD. I'm sure everybody who dealt with it, and obviously the ultimate sacrifice was by the pilots. I'm not, and that's part of PTSD though, is that, the whole time like, well, but I'm alive and so why I have no business complaining about anything. And so I think in paragliding, I think that's something that all of us deal with, to some extent, unfortunately, over and over. And I think, luckily I was able to talk to some people that gave me some really good advice about that. And like I said, I still, the ultimate sorrow is for the pilot and the passenger. And I still think about them and hope, I never see that again. But for me coming back as a survivor and dealing with it, it took me a few months to even, talk about it. And then, once we started talking about it, I was given some important information to find other people who've experienced this and talk with them about it and talk candidly and don't be afraid to talk about it. And so for me, that was a huge thing that I needed to, in order for me to, and it wasn't that, flying is in proportion to life is obviously not very high on that scale. But in terms of me getting back in the sky, I was flying and I was flying fine. I was flying about, the same, but I had my head in the sand. So I was flying with kind of that part cordoned off and pretty much just, moving forward just with the mechanical parts of it, but not really, not really enjoying it tremendously.
Was it something like you felt like you just needed to go do because you're a pilot and you weren't, then you'd be flying and be like, what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? Or can you describe that more?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's for me, when things like that happen, like the next day I put my head in the sand, I flew 230 kilometer triangle or something. Flying can help me escape that. Mm-hmm. But ultimately those things start to build up inside. And in terms of performance, I think that was the first step of me shutting down and really needing to kind of reprocess all these things.
I've gone through these times where, I feel like, oh, the forecast is good. I should go fly because I'm a pilot and I should be training and I should be practicing. And then I go fly and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm not enjoying it. I'm scared or, we go through these ebbs and flows like you've talked about, but is that tied into the PSD that you had? Or were you kind of, am I reading it right? Is that what you were kind of doing? Or was it more just like, well, you were just ignoring the PTSD? Like the next day you just ignored it. Head in the sand, just went flying. Yeah.
Head in the sand. But no, Gavin, that's an incredibly astute point. And that all plays into this because it's basically about, the that happens to me. Yes. That not from this particular occurrence, but that has happened to me over the last 20 years, especially people like you, myself, like now my career is paragliding.
Yeah.
And, sometimes I called Bill Belcourt after the third thing, which that in this list of this year of horrible things to happen around me. And kind of, saying like, I don't know if I can continue. I don't know why I do this. I don't know if I can continue to do this. I love flying, but I love my family. I love life. I love mountain. I love being on this planet. And I think a lot of us deal with that or don't,
yeah.
Which is the head in the sand technique. But I think that we all, a lot of us who have been in this a while now, and it starts to add up. In terms of, wow, this is, there is, we know it's risky. We're not deluded. We know that it can be dangerous. And it always has been worth it to me. The amount of joy, the highs, were worth the lows. But at some point, when things keep piling up on us, and I've seen this with a lot of our friends over the years, that we start to really try to see, like, the balances don't seem like they're, tipped. The lows seem to, are outweighing the highs.
Yeah, it gets more difficult to rationalize, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, you just had a kid. I mean, I imagine that,
Totally.
That it would be a factor to me as well,
Yep.
Whereas
Totally.
when I was a single guy, in Jackson, there was times, this is before spots and DeLormes, I could care less. I was like, I'm flying. I was missing for 2 days once. And I would fly over the Absarokas with no tracking, and I was thinking, wow, the search pattern is going to be like 4,000 square miles, if I'm missing. And, we had no DeLormes, no spots, and I could care less. But, as I've aged, right, I mean, A, I didn't think I would live this long. Otherwise, I probably would have done more yoga. And B, we just get a little smarter, right? Like that, and more wise. And so it gets harder when these, incidents are upfront, personal, to rationalize why we're doing it. And obviously to perform well in any, to take it to performance, which is, I know it's a stretch and a weird, connection, but you need to be centered. And so that was, this is like, kind of the first block in the uncentering for me.
Before we go from there, can you tell me about the advice? You said you got some really good advice, and maybe just, tell us also, what is PTSD in this situation? Like, describe it.
Post-traumatic stress disorder. So for, and you can, everybody should look this up. Obviously we come from America, Gavin and I, and so because we're such a worry population, this is a common phrase in our culture. Because we have all our poor soldiers returning, a lot of them have PTSD. And basically, it's, the advice I got, like I said, was to go find other people who have been in the similar situation and talk about all the details, all the things that are tripping you up, to just talk constantly about it with them. And also to acknowledge it and to accept it and give it space in your life so that you can then, try to climb over it. And you will always live with these experiences. And that's just the way it is. But you can, climb over that and move forward and come to some peace and understanding about it. I think I can within myself and with the context. But, it's almost like, I see it almost like cancer, in the sense that these things will always be a part of you, and there could be a recurrence at any time, when you see something else that will trigger this. So it's also acknowledging that, and like I said, just being open to it and understanding and dealing with it, and not just putting your head in the sand. And so that's my advice. But, that's from an amateur,
No, but I like that. I mean, and then was your head still in the sand when you went to Brazil, or were you more had you had the talks with Belcourt and?
Well, no. So there I was still, this is before I needed old Yoda. But so yeah, I was kind of back to, I'd been dealt with it. I processed it. My close people had kind of helped me take the brunt of it. And then we're, on to Brazil, and I was feeling good and happy. I was with my friends in the first 2 days. The first day went well. I got second, and then, someone died, during the comp, a Brazilian pilot. And so again, you start to, and I didn't see it. I wasn't a part of it. I was well past there. I didn't even know what happened when I came into land. But again, like I said, that balance, those scales, right? We start to eye them up again and evaluating, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And then I had another good day, but I could definitely, that was kind of a chink in the armor, And then I just kind of had a couple bad days, but I did have one of the most adventurous days while I was there, which included a 4-hour hike where I went 1.5 miles.
What?
Yeah, and I was hiking the entire time. So yeah, like I lost a lot of my dignity in Brazil that trip, including belly crawling for an hour, over reeds, pulling my glider behind me because otherwise it would sink me up to my chest in water.
So you're just in a massive swamp, a reed swamp or something?
Yeah. And I was like, I hope there's not snakes. I'm like, I'm going to die if I get bit by something poisonous. There's no one, I'm not going to be able to get out of here. But anyway, so that didn't go well. And then basically my girlfriend came to Brazil. We went traveling. I got really drunk the last night celebrating our trip and just slept all night really funny on my shoulder. My shoulder's been hurting me for years. And so by the time I got to the World Cup, it hurt, just sitting there. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't, any of that. And I just started, basically when you're in pain like that for me, I've experienced it once before with my back. Chronic pain and paragliding for me mean no patience. So anytime, you're like, well, just forget it. I'm just going to go. If, you're like, I'm high enough, I'm going to go. So there was that. And then there was just
no
the fact
discipline.
that no discipline.
Right.
It goes out the window because you just want the day to be over. You want the pain to end,
Yeah.
But also, I'm not going to blame it all on that. I also was just not having a good competition. And that was, there were some classic, moments of bad decision mixed with, kind of bad luck where I'd fly to a giant, in Brazil, there'd be thermals marked by birds that go thousands of feet high. And I'd fly to that thermal, there'd be 2,000 feet of birds climbing, and they'd all fly away together, or, stuff like that where you're like, what the
yeah. Good timing.
And so I'd land. Yeah. I'm like, all right, because I didn't have a lot of discipline. I wasn't high. And then I'd be like, boom, 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 landing. And then, Mickey Siegel actually said a funny thing to me too. He's like, now when I see you, Nick, I know to go the opposite direction. Because there is a thing, I think, with some people, like he said, this happened to another guy, a French pilot once. It's just that sometimes when you're doing really bad, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. You're not the guy to bet on at the craps table.
No, yeah, it's like you're a cooler.
Right.
And so that was kind of where I was. And so it just kept getting worse and worse. And then, it's like, I just don't care. I just want to land by a road. If I was going to land, the funny, a couple funny things was, Torsten said he's never searched the bottom of the list, to see, he would look for his result at the top because he was like in the top 3. And then he's like, and then I would scroll all the way to the bottom to see if you made it, if you did it, and I'm like, yeah, I did it. I last place. Cause there was a French girl who had like broken her foot or something and didn't fly for 3 days. And because of FTV, she beat me in the end, but it was close right up to the last day. It was me and her fighting for last.
You did it.
But I persevered, I don't think, she could quite, mess with my team loser status. But yeah, so that, but I stayed and you stay and celebrate the winner. And, huge congratulations to Michael Kofer for flying that's a tricky place to fly. And he flew consistently and crushed it. And it was awesome to be there and party with him and celebrate. And I got a great photo that, with he and I, so it's, if you're not first, you're last, kind of the bookends of pilots for the PWC in Brazil.
So it seems to me like, the World Cup's kind of one thing because of the shoulder and just, at some point there was probably just this like, fuck it, but with the Pan Ams, 2 days crushing. So, cause this has happened to me and I try to do like you, I try to write it down and log it and try to figure it out. And my problem is always discipline. But when you go from, hero to you really in the Pan Ams, you kind of had that one from my perspective. You just had to fly discipline and you would have won it more, or you would have done pretty well. Was that a mental thing, or was it just, were you pushing too hard? Was there something you could identify that was like, yeah, I blew that, or was it just paragliding and it just luck?
No, I blew that. That's the biggest lead I've ever blown. With FTV, I just had to come in decent one day, and I think I would have won.
Right.
But yeah, no, that's the biggest lead I've ever blown. But I hadn't been racing in the last couple of years. I think it was discipline. I also think my shoulder was starting to hurt. So I got home, and I was like, man, this shoulder, I got an MRI and I have a torn part of my shoulder. And it needs surgery. It's fully torn. And if I take care of it and do all the things that need to do, it's usable, and that's the thing at Rat Race. I was taking 12 ibuprofen a day, which the doctor said is okay. And then putting some, this hemp oil on it topically. And that was really helpful. So, but the point is, there was a real injury. I think I think I just blew it, but at the Pan Ams. In terms of, I made really poor decisions. I started flying a little bit desperate. I started flying, not good tactically, not a good tactical flying decisions. The first 2 days I flew great tactically. And no matter what, you can't, outmaneuver, the other pilots with bad decisions. But I also think it was also just, like I said, the balance was starting to creep again in terms of me being, and I really wasn't having a ton of fun. I wasn't happy up there. I was it started becoming kind of annoying to go to launch. We couldn't get to launch a bunch of the days. I think also I just let a bunch of external factors influence. That's the thing. It's all about just staying calm and enjoying the process. If you can't get to launch, it's cool. If it's you think, oh, well, we may not fly today. Always be prepared to fly today. Always be positive. And I think for me, that's the number one thing. And then, if you're positive, you're always prepared to fly, you're flying as decently tactically, you're going to make some mistakes. That's all you can do. And then it's just you, versus the course versus you versus the pilots, And I think if you're racing the course, that's the way forward. You're not racing the other pilots. They're there to help you.
That's really good advice.
And if you can do that, you usually come out pretty good.
So before we started recording, you had some really good thoughts on like the team loser thing. Like how do you go from the strategy of flying the course, but also you were talking about like day one at the Rat Race. You're leading. You're with the lead gaggle and I can't even remember what happened. Was it the first day or second day? Anyway, you had one of the days where you didn't make it. And
the second day.
Second day, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, no, the second day I got dropped, but I was able. So, I think I know where you're going. Yeah. So, one of the things, we have this thing called Team Loser in America, and there's a Facebook page, which is hysterical. You guys should all check it out. But we basically, we had this group of people that we were losers. We had come from a, long tradition of probably ADD and getting ahead of ourselves. And so it learned at an early age that generally we were going to fuck up at some point and would need to apologize or, we just, not be we weren't true winners. And I think that it's a really funny philosophical kind of group. So there's winners and losers, right? And you can see, like, if you ask somebody like, hey, you want to be on Team Loser, and they're a real winner, you can see their eyes start to twitch. Because they don't identify as a loser. They're real winners. They're the go-getters. They're the doers. They're they're best and the brightest. And they went to an Ivy League and they've always been winning. But a loser, like, myself and a group of us, I think we failed a lot more and we're able to, and so therefore had to pick ourselves up more. Right. And I think that comes into play in competition paragliding. Again, I think paragliding is the perfect mixture for ADD kind of, individuals to a certain level of ADD. And this is another example of how it benefits us to have been losers before we started paragliding. So that, we're disappointed and bummed as much as anyone if we bomb out, but we can also go, all right, well, tomorrow's a new day. Let's see what goes on. And now with FTV, we've seen, over and over that if you just keep racing the course as well as you possibly can, all you can do is as good as you can anyway. You can't, and that's maybe Facebook's bringing us down a bad road that way. We're always trying to do as good as to keep up with the Joneses, right?
Yeah.
But really all we can do is as well as each of us can. And so as long as you do that and keep moving forward, you'll usually end up in a good spot. So, that I think being a loser inevitably will help you win in paragliding.
So did you do anything between, we've had a terrifically bad spring of flying, all of us, all over the West. It's just been brutal. There's a day here or there at best. And so I know, because I watch XC flying like a hawk, that, and I always watch for your flights out in Nevada and stuff. And, you've had a couple with Josh, but between the World Cup and rat race, none of us got really that much time. And so did you do anything? Yeah, exactly. Did you mentally, did you do anything? I mean, how did you just, to me, you showed up and you were like, I got this. Did that just happen?
Well, for me, it was all about my shoulder. It was just about I just had to, because like I said, the discomfort. And so look, your shoulder in quotes can be different things, but something that's making you uncomfortable, whether it's mentally, whether it's, your equipment, whether it's the conditions, whatever is making you uncomfortable, that needs to be identified and addressed for you to perform, right? We always joke about the beta blockers in the Swiss team, they're so calm and they're able to, but that is truly, that's it. So whatever your shoulder is, we use the shoulder as this ambiguous thing for each of us. I guess a heel is what we say in American English. Whatever your heel is, your Achilles, that is what needs to be addressed. So for me, I needed to address my shoulder. In terms of, I just had to get it to a place where I could actually fly without pain. And so even on the practice day, I only flew for an hour because I was worried, I don't want to use up my shoulder, or I would launch late too each day. If the cylinder was right over launch, I would wait 45 minutes, because I was like, well, that's 45 minutes. I don't have to fly with my shoulder, and it worked. My shoulder felt great. And then as well, I just tried to have fun. That was, for me, we have our things, but for me, if I'm having fun, then everything else falls into place. And so I just try to have fun and enjoy my time there, with you and with all the other pilots that I get to, when we fly up, I was just so psyched to be flying with my friends and also just be flying, because we haven't, I only flew twice since between Brazil but after Brazil, it took me 6 weeks to get my shoulder not to be just inflamed as all hell. And so, that also is why I didn't fly, because I just needed to rest it.
Tell me about some of the specific things that you remember doing that, maybe afterwards you went, yeah, that really paid off. The strategy, tactics, or, God forbid I should compare our sport to golf, but, in terms of mentally, and I'm not a golfer, but my dad was and my sister was, and, they always talk about, 5 hours a day for 5 days is really hard to keep your shit together. Just one shot is all it takes to blow your whole comp. And paragliding, with FDV, it's maybe not that harsh, but it's, it's kind of like that. It's really, once we step off the mountain, it really is almost all mental. In these long comps like Rat Race, where it's 7 days, for sure, there's some physical component to it. But what did you, after the first couple days, you're back in the swing of things, you're climbing well, you're up on top of the gaggles every day. You're like, yeah, I can win this. Then what do you do? How do you address each day?
Take it day by day. Yeah. Don't think I can win this. It's just day by day. It's like, hey, I'm out here with my buddies again today. Let's have one. And then, the key is, I think, Mitch brought up no compounding mistakes. There were some talks on launch that I learned stuff from. So, no compounding mistakes. If you do get left behind, just fly as well as you can. I got left behind one day by 15K. But luckily, so did Donizete and Matt Henze. And so we had a perfect group to rage back, and we ended up finishing, you crushed that day. I think we were 10 minutes behind you, but, there was only you and Brad and then the whole rest of our group. So, flying the course, flying as good as you can, taking it just, day by day, not thinking about the win. But then, once I did get in the lead, reeling it back. And, so it's if you crack off good flights in the beginning and can have a good result, you can, coming into goal one day, I could let Mitch go and I could slow back down. And so just being conservative sometimes, when that called for. So the tactics definitely, change a little bit, just like in bike racing or anything. If you have a lead, it's really difficult with FTV though, because you have no clue what.
Really tricky. Yeah.
For me, I mean, I can't figure out the scoring formula. And we had some problems with ours, and they sent it to Jorg. He's like, yeah, it's messed up. So I think no one can figure out the scoring formula, and that's kind of disappointing. I hope that they can fix that at some point. Someone, people smarter than us.
So you do,
because that's kind of bogus.
Like verbally, when you're with your friends and stuff, the reason we all love to hang out with you is because you're freaking hysterical. And one of the things you do is kind of this like, oh, dude, I'm for sure going to blow it tomorrow. Is that just for us? Is that just entertainment? Or is that, because when I read like these psychology, Mitch inspired me to like start reading more psychology, and Josh did too. He talked about, that's how he's become kind of the bot, is he read all this psychology and, like kind of the Belcourt, like bringing it thing, like the psychology, the optimistic self-talk. You're the opposite of that. You're always like, yeah, I'm definitely going to fuck it up tomorrow. Is that just for our entertainment? Is that actually what's going through your head? Or
oh no, I've never thought of it. Maybe I do that subconsciously. No, I mean, I think I definitely like myself less than most people. And so, yeah, I don't know. And like I said, I am a loser. And so, I've blown leads before. So I'm like, oh God, but no, you're right. I should stop doing that. I mean, really, I should, and the truth is, when I'm up raging, and I know I'm having one. Like, I know when I'm in the zone. So that's kind of cool. So, but when I'm standing on the ground talking shit, I'm not gonna be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna fuck people up tomorrow. I have no idea what's gonna happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because that's the truth to me. But so to me, it's more about being truthful versus self-fulfilling. Because when I'm up there and I'm like, oh, I'm on one, I go.
Yeah.
That's when you'll see, I'll push out, I'll leave. I don't care who's with me. So I do know when I'm in the zone, and so that's kind of cool.
Is there anything you can do to get in the zone?
Time, I mean, how can we know? It's like paragliding. Like, I bombed out one day being stupid. I wasn't sleeping that great. And, luckily that night I got a great night's sleep, and I'm like, this is the best I've felt all comp. It was day 7,
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. That's interesting to think. I've never thought about it, but I'll take that back and think about that.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I've been trying to, they just talk about in these books, and this is, I'm not on this like self-help kick, God forbid. It's not like that. It's more just,
that's fine too.
I've been reading this guy that was a shooter, and he just wasn't an athlete, couldn't, was last to get picked on the baseball team and basketball team and everything, track and field. And his dad was an athlete. And so it really bummed him out. And he just became one of the best shooters in the world, 3 Olympics and all this stuff. And it was just from training, but also he has this kind of mental approach of just, you've got to talk yourself into being a winner. You got to talk yourself into being like, I'm good at this. And I think that's what Mitch brought up at the thing. And so but I'm curious because in paragliding, you have these, like you said, it's manic. And I'm wondering what your self-talk was that week, and especially as the week went on. Was there, like you said, you were disciplined about your strategy, like, hey, okay, now I don't need to win every day. All I need to do is just don't let anybody get too far out. I need to be disciplined now. But was there other self-talk that was going on that was like I'm talking about during the comp, like once you've launched? After the start. Okay.
After the start, I think, for me, competition is about getting, if I'm doing it well, I'm in a really good routine, So, you notice I showed up every day, right, in the morning at a certain time.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, it's all about a routine. So I get into this routine and that's the Groundhog Day, and that's the beauty of it, where, I'll have my coffee at the same time in the morning. Usually I like to work for 2 hours before the competition so that I can feel like, okay, I've done with my work for the day, at least to hold it off. And then come meet everyone, and then just try to keeping the energy low there. And then, to launch so that there's a routine. It happens the same every day. And that to me is really important, in terms of keeping my energy where it should be at the times it should be. And then on launch, those talks are a little distracting actually. But even on launch, they changed the launch thing once. I don't know if you remember that, where they put the board out one day so that everybody could program during and that's the day I sunk out, was because then I felt like I mean, that's not the reason why.
Yeah, you feel like you're off the back.
I was off the back the whole time. I launched without my instruments on. I was like, and I felt like people got ahead of me. So I do think that there's psychology in that, and so whatever, there also, I just was tired of it. And I was, it was day 6. I wasn't flying well, but while I'm up there, no, it's, I'm really just trying to focus on having fun and flying cross country. And I know that I've flown paragliders cross country and race and more races than most of the people at the competition. So in terms of experience, I have no excuse. There's nothing holding back. I have the best equipment I can have. There's no excuses there. And so then it all just comes down to having fun. And if I have fun, I feel like I can win anywhere, and so to me, I guess that's just focusing on that. But that's why it's so important to deal with all these other things for me, whether it's, the PTSD or not having your gear ready or whatever it may be, so that it's worth it for us. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, otherwise, if I'm up there and it's not that fun and I'm kind of stressed and I don't like this, I don't like that, then that balance starts to tip for me in terms of, this isn't worth the risk. The reward isn't worth the risk. It's only when I'm really having fun and I'm like, wow, look at the Earth. We're up here. And what an amazing sport. I can't believe we get to do this. I mean, I guess that's the self-talk that's going through my head when I'm doing well. And I'm up here with my friends and, oh, how cool. There's Gavin. What's up? And if that is, to me, then it's because the scales are tipping back. Oh, this is totally worth it. This is worth it to me to risk. I can mitigate the risk with practice and skill, and therefore I'm stoked to be up here. So I don't know. I ask myself that a lot. And now flying cross country, I go land if I'm not happy. I used to just grind it out, or I don't even go launch. I don't even go to launch. I'd go, I'm not stoked. Why would I'm just going to go mountain biking, or I'm going to do something else. And so I think being truly honest and listening to your gut, it will make you a better pilot. So all these things, that's the funny part, is that it's not just, these foo-foo things. They're actually, this is all performance-driven suggestions,
Have you ever noticed, you mentioned flow, and I think that this is a common theme with flying, with human flight these days, just in life. There's been a lot of research and stuff on it. Adele Honte, one of my guests a few episodes back, talked a lot about flow. If you talk, and I think it's something we've all experienced in flying at certain times. Certainly I've had days in the X-Alps where there's just amazing flow, and other days where you're like, yep, there's no flow here. There's zero. Have you ever identified like a way to enter it, or you've said there are days where you're racing, you're just like, I've got it, I have this, and then other days where it's more of a struggle. Have you ever noticed like what maybe leads you to that, or what is it, or does it just kind of happen? Because I never have. I've never figured that out. I've never figured out that equation. Like sometimes it's just going, and other times it's like, fuck, man, I can't find it.
Yeah, for me, I think it's routine. Like I was saying, I develop that routine and I don't try to deviate from it, and that gives me my best chance of getting into it. I think too, the key, and one of the reasons I did well, is because you also need to know when your flow is over. Sometimes you only get flow for a little bit, and that's fine. Don't be afraid, don't be mad at that. Take that as a bonus, and then then I just start bumbling around until I can like get back into a rhythm. But the beautiful thing about competing is you'll have other people to work with you until you get back into it.
Yeah.
For me, it often takes eating. Just as long as I'm keeping my mind fed, I can stay in a good state. But that's once an hour, eating and drinking. I know you've heard me talk about that incessantly, but I think that's because for me, my form of ADD, or just my whatever neurochemical composition, it needs that food. It needs sugars. It needs proteins in order to stay in a flow, or just even in a rhythm. But I think it's that just like bad decisions compounding each other, I think flow can compound each other. So when you're in it, go have one. Enjoy it. Yeah. And so I think it will perpetuate itself. But like if I get gobbled up by the gaggle nowadays, I'm like, cool. There's all my friends. I guess that was fun. I'm going to fly with them now. And I think that often you see the newer comp pilots who are doing well, as soon as they get gobbled up by the gaggle, they try to push on low. And so that's another kind of psychological switch that's happened in recent years for me.
One of the things that I'm noticing, like on Instagram, I see like the best of the best of Chevy and Aaron Duragatti and Siegel, and they take a lot of photos. They're like you. They take a lot of photos at comps. And I'm always, I used to look at that and go, God, I can't imagine, I'm focused so hard in comps, and I'm thinking so much, and I'm strategizing so much. And and I often, like when I fly XC here, I also eat every hour. And then I go to a comp and I'm like, come on, this is 3 hours. I don't need to do that. But I think that I've been wrong about that. I think like you're saying, when you're taking pictures and you're having fun, you relax. You're stepping back out of the moment a little bit, and you're just enjoying it, and therefore you fly better.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a breaking point. But like in photos, for example, I'll take photos, when I'm like before the start. It's an hour and a half before the start.
Yeah,
it gives me something to do.
Right. And it relaxes.
And so I'll do it then. Yeah, well, it gives you a shift, and then I go, okay, I put it away. Now, this is what I'm doing more of now. Okay, now it's time to put it away and dive into what, like what I need to be doing. And so it also just gives me a break, and then some days it's like, yeah, I'm not really feeling it. You don't even pull it out, So, I don't know. I think arguably photography could be an interesting tool for advanced pilots to give yourself breaks and be able to, come out the other side, having like kind of refreshed,
Yeah, and I think that's what that eating does as well, or even just peeing. All these things are just little things where you're like, okay, you know what? Actually, blowing this glide a tiny bit's not going to be that big a deal. It's going to make me more comfortable. I'm going to be better prepared. All that. You kind of learn that you just don't need to be hammering all the time.
Well, my climbing suffers if I'm not eating.
Yeah,
I can tell. I know for sure, because as soon as I eat, I'm like, yep, back here. Good. Now I'm feeling good again. So it's kind of funny. I even like, I forgot to eat because I'm climbing like shit. I can tell. So I think there's a lot to it. So why would you? This is just like any race, and these are these rhythms, these patterns. It's like, if you train one way, you train at home, you eat once an hour. When you go to the race, well, eat once an hour, even if it's an hour long.
What did you learn from Donizetti? That was really cool for all of us. I know Mitch made a bunch of comments about like him turning way wider, and just Donizetti was out climbing him all the time. So Mitch was like, I got to figure this out. That was really cool and useful for all of us, because we all fly with all of us all the time. And it was really neat to have somebody from a different continent who's really awesome, who has flown as far as the farthest flight that's ever been done. Just total badass.
Twice.
What's that?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Twice.
Yeah. Twice. Exactly.
Yeah.
564. That's not bad. What did you learn from him? Because you guys were having a killer battle right till the end, but.
Yeah. For me, it was just a real joy to fly with him. I mean, that's the thing. The beauty of this sport is in competitions at the top level, I am thrilled to fly with that. It was a true joy to fly with him, and it was cool to watch him, basically team fly, and even on the practice days with me, we would be pointing and helping each other, and I don't know if you guys realize that, but yeah, generally we were both helping each other as much as possible.
Yeah.
And that's what, a lot of people do. It's like, hey, look, we're all in this together to the last 15K.
Yeah.
And the faster that we can rally through here and get ahead of the next pack, the better. So, So he was just a real pleasure to fly with, because he has so much experience flying in a joint manner with other people to reach success. So it's just I'm psyched that we have someone else in our community. It's really fun to be in a position where we're always welcoming people, in the sense that it's never overcrowded in the U.S. for great pilots. So anybody that wants to come race with us, please come over. We'll show you a real good time. Yeah,
well, talking about a real good time and a real good race and a real good location, what are your takeaways from the rat race going into Chelan? Is there more pressure? Is there less pressure? Are you just stoked? What will you take away from, what will you bring to that race that came out of the rat race?
Yeah, clean slate, I think. Yeah. I feel a little better. Coming back from the World Cup, I was like, wow, maybe this is over, I'll never race well again. Obviously these thoughts go through your head.
Sure.
Not that that's going to be the end all for my life and how I'll be noted when I'm gone. But, you think about that. You're like, oh man, maybe this is over, that's last place is, while it's really funny and I am proud, because it's very difficult to really come in last place, and be trying, not be injured. it's the same. It can happen again. That's the thing with paragliding racing. If you look at the competitions, very few people, once the wings were all equal, have dominated a paragliding competition.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a super final last year after Aaron won twice, and then last year I think he was in the 80s. It's paragliding.
Yeah,
it's just how it goes.
Yeah, so no, I'm just thrilled for Chelan. That's my favorite place in the world to race, and so I'm just psyched to be there with all you guys. And Nate's coming, and we're gonna have a great group of people, Mickey Siegel and Irv Schonauer, and it'll just be, I'm just really enjoying more and more these races. We get to fly with my friends. I get to fly with my friends, and that I don't get to fly with anybody anymore. Hardly where I live, and so it's just a real great opportunity to be in a cool place, fly with my friends. So that's what I'm taking into it.
Nick, before we sign off, because there's a ton of good stuff here, you said that you had the Kenya thing, and then there were a couple others. Do you want to go into those before we depart?
No. I think people get the idea. My point, and I hope if people can take away from this is that it's okay, and maybe because we're so crazy, we even have to say this. I think a lot of us smarter people just have left the sport earlier, once one thing happens. But the fact that we have to, to me, being the hard-headed, kind of crazy, paraglider driver that I am, it's okay to process and deal with these things, and your friends are there for you and talk about it, and whatever that may be. Maybe it's something else, but if you want to increase your performance, and you're not doing as well as you want to be, I think that you need to look at what's actually truly affecting you and then deal with whatever that is. So that's my takeaway.
Great advice. Nick, thank you so much, man. This was really special. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to race with you, dude, again in Chelan. It's going to be so fun.
I know.
And
I know.
it was just awesome to watch you rock that thing. That was a really cool. I was witness to something very special there. That was super fun, and just a great week of racing. They did an awesome job putting that on. But thank you for sharing all that.
Well, Gavin, thank you. And thank you for this resource. I hear so many pilots all over the world grateful for this. This is the biggest educational tool that's arguably ever been in the sport. So keep it up. And thank you for working on that global rescue thing. USHFA is now able to offer that to its members. And a huge part of that is because of you. So, and that's, as you know, I'm a big proponent in all that rescue insurance. So I just want to take a moment to thank you, Gavin, for all that you do, and keep doing it, man. It's really helping, and I think it's making pilots' lives better. So thanks.
That's awesome. Well, it certainly is a pleasure. Thanks, Nick.
All right. See ya.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Always fun to hear from Nick, and that going from 0 to hero is pretty entertaining. It's going to be fun to race with them here in Chelan, one of the greatest places to race in the world in my mind, here in a couple weeks. But as always, all we ask for is a buck a show. If you've enjoyed the show or you got something out of it, or if you're just discovering the show, please go back and check out all the many, many, many hours of incredible advice like this show was from Nick Grease, Russ Ogden, and Will Gadd, and Nate Scales, and Cedar Wright, and there's some terrific content there. So go back and check those out. And yet, if you can't afford it, we totally understand. There are many ways to support the show. You can blog about it. You can share it on Facebook or Instagram or however you talk to your friends. You can talk about it on the way up to launch. That's what I just heard at the Rat Race. People are doing a lot of is, listening to the podcast and then having discussions on the way up. Like, hey, what'd you think about this? Did you agree with that? That's all very cool as well. So it's awesome that the word is spreading. It's so fantastic that so many people are listening. It's a real joy to bring to you. You can find other ways to support the show at the website, cloudbasemayhem.com, and just click on support. And you can do it on a one-time basis through PayPal, or you can sign up through Patreon and be rewarded for doing so, or you can kind of just set it, forget it. So it wouldn't be possible without you, our listeners, making this possible. So thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next show. Cheers.